For most people, war feels like something distant, something that happens in history books or in faraway places. But throughout history, large conflicts have affected not only the countries directly involved, but also the global economy. Trade routes change, energy supplies become uncertain, governments increase spending, and markets react. When these changes happen at the same time, the cost of everyday life can rise. Food becomes more expensive, fuel prices increase, transportation costs rise, and many households begin to feel financial pressure. This does not mean that war automatically causes the same economic outcomes in every situation. Every conflict is different. Different countries have different resources, policies, and economic systems. However, economic history shows that large geopolitical conflicts often create conditions that can push prices higher. In this video, we will explore why that happens. We will look at the economic mechanisms that link war and rising costs of living, energy markets, global supply chains, government spending, currency dynamics, and how uncertainty affects financial markets. The goal is not to predict a specific future event. It is to understand how global economic systems respond during periods of conflict, because when people understand the mechanisms behind economic change, they are better able to prepare for uncertainty. Why wars affect the global economy. War is not only a military event. It is also an economic event. Large conflicts require enormous resources. Governments must finance military operations. Industries shift production toward defense needs. Transportation networks may be disrupted. Trade relationships may change rapidly. All of these factors influence how goods and services move through the global economy. When supply chains are disrupted, shortages can occur. And when shortages occur, prices often rise. This basic economic principle, the relationship between supply and demand, plays a central role during periods of geopolitical tension. If supply decreases while demand remains constant or increases, prices tend to move upward. War can create exactly these kinds of conditions. Energy prices and global conflict. Energy markets are often among the first areas affected during major geopolitical tensions. Oil and natural gas are critical resources for modern economies. They power transportation, electricity generation, manufacturing, agriculture. When conflicts occur in regions that produce or transport energy resources, markets may react quickly. Even the possibility of disruption can influence prices. If traders believe supply could become limited, prices may rise in anticipation. This reaction does not always reflect an immediate shortage. Sometimes it reflects uncertainty. Energy costs affect nearly every other part of the economy. Transportation becomes more expensive. Manufacturing costs increase. Food production costs rise. As a result, higher energy prices can spread throughout the broader economy. This process is sometimes called cost-push inflation, where rising production costs lead to higher prices for consumers. Food supply and agriculture food markets are also sensitive to geopolitical disruptions. Agriculture depends on several global inputs: fuel for farm equipment, fertilizers, transportation, networks, international grain trade, when conflict disrupts these systems. Food supply chains may experience stress. For example, fertilizer production depends heavily on energy and certain minerals. If energy prices rise or export routes change, fertilizer availability may decline. Lower fertilizer supply can affect crop yields. Similarly, if major agricultural regions experience conflict or trade restrictions, global food supply may tighten. When supply tightens, food prices can increase. This does not mean that shortages are inevitable, but economic history shows that food markets often respond strongly to geopolitical uncertainty. Government spending during war. Another economic factor linked to war is government spending. Large military operations require significant financial resources. Governments may increase spending on defense, logistics, equipment, and personnel to finance this spending. Governments may use several methods: taxes, borrowing through government bonds, or monetary expansion through central bank policies. Each of these choices can influence the broader economy. When government borrowing increases significantly, it may influence interest rates or public debt levels. In some cases, increased money supply combined with limited production capacity can contribute to inflation. However, the outcome depends on many variables: economic policy, industrial capacity, international trade, relationships. This is why economists often analyze each situation carefully, rather than assuming identical outcomes. Supply chain disruptions. Modern economies depend heavily on global supply chains. Raw materials may be extracted in one country, manufactured in another, and sold in markets across the world. This interconnected system increases efficiency during stable periods, but it can also create vulnerability during geopolitical disruptions. War can affect supply chains in several ways. Transportation routes may become unsafe. Sanctions may limit trade between countries. Certain materials may become restricted. Insurance costs for shipping may increase. When supply chains slow down or fragment, businesses may face higher costs, and those costs may eventually appear in consumer prices. Financial markets and uncertainty. Financial markets are highly sensitive to uncertainty. During geopolitical crises, investors often reassess risk. They may move capital toward assets considered more stable. Government bonds, precious metals, cash reserves. When investors shift capital rapidly, financial markets can experience volatility. Stock prices may fluctuate. Currencies may move. Commodity markets may react strongly. These movements do not necessarily reflect long-term economic fundamentals. Often they reflect short-term uncertainty. But these reactions can still influence real economic conditions. Currency value and inflation. Another economic channel through which war can affect prices is currency stability. If investors believe a country's economy may face increased risks, its currency may weaken relative to others. When a currency weakens, imported goods become more expensive. Many countries rely on imported energy, technology, or raw materials. If those imports become more costly due to currency changes, domestic prices may rise. This dynamic can contribute to inflation during periods of geopolitical stress. However, the magnitude of the effect varies widely depending on the country and its economic structure. Psychological effects on consumers and businesses' economic systems are influenced not only by physical supply and demand, but also by expectations. If businesses expect costs to rise, they may adjust prices earlier. If consumers expect shortages, they may increase purchasing in advance. This behavior can temporarily increase demand. Higher demand combined with uncertain supply can further influence prices. Economists sometimes refer to this as expectation-driven inflation. Expectations alone do not determine prices, but they can influence market behavior during uncertain periods. How households experience these changes, while macroeconomic changes may appear abstract, they eventually affect everyday life. Fuel costs influence transportation. Transportation affects food prices. Energy costs affect electricity and heating. Higher interest rates can affect housing markets. For households with limited financial buffers, rising living costs can create significant financial stress. This is why financial planning often emphasizes resilience, emergency savings, budget flexibility, debt management. These strategies do not eliminate macroeconomic risks, but they can reduce personal financial vulnerability. Economic resilience. It is important to emphasize that economies are highly adaptive systems. Even during difficult geopolitical periods, innovation and policy responses often emerge. Countries adjust supply chains. Industries find alternative sources for materials. Technological innovation improves efficiency. While conflict can create economic stress, economies are not static. They evolve in response to challenges. This adaptability is one reason why long-term economic growth has continued, despite many historical disruptions. Conclusion: war has always had economic consequences. Throughout history, major conflicts have influenced energy markets, trade systems, government spending, and financial markets. These changes can sometimes contribute to rising prices and increased economic uncertainty. However, outcomes vary widely depending on the scale of the conflict, economic policies, and global cooperation. Understanding the economic mechanisms behind these changes allows individuals to think more clearly about risk. Rather than reacting to fear or speculation, people can focus on building financial resilience, savings, diversified income, adaptable skills, and long-term planning. Because while global events may be unpredictable, financial resilience often comes from preparation rather than prediction. In uncertain times, stability is rarely about controlling the world. It is about building the ability to adapt to it.